Hi everyone, I'm Daisy and welcome to our new series of Advanced Podcast where we help you to have high level of English fluency and become more advanced. In the world of language, words can be a weapon, a shield, or a key to unlock doors we didn't even know existed. But within this arsenal lies something even more powerful, idioms. Today we explore the idiomatic expressions that have shaped literature, politics, and even your own daily life. But beware, this isn't for the faint of heart.
Hi, this is Liam. If you think idioms are merely decorative language, think again. They are windows into culture, history, and power. These expressions have been sharpened over centuries, appearing in places you might least expect, from Shakespeare's sonnets to modern political speeches. Stick with us, because by the end you'll see language as you've never seen it before.
Take Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken. This is not just a poem about choice, it's about consequence. We often hear people say they've taken the road less traveled. But what does that really mean? It's more than a simple decision. It's a reflection on how one idiomatic phrase can encapsulate the human condition, the risk, the unknown, the bravery in stepping away from convention.
When someone says they've taken the road less traveled, it's not just a boast. They are communicating a willingness to challenge the status quo, to face isolation or failure for the sake of authenticity. But here's the twist. How often do people truly walk that road? Or are they simply cloaking themselves in poetic language? That's the question we must ask, and why idioms invite us to think critically about what's really being said.
And speaking of challenges, let's talk about one of the most evocative idioms in our lexicon. Smooth seas never made a skilled sailor. This expression is steeped in metaphor, but its true meaning goes beyond the sea. In life, as in politics and business, it's the hardships that sharpen our skills, that teach us resilience. But what if the seas never calm? What happens when we're constantly facing adversity?
That's when the real depth of idiomatic language reveals itself. Consider the Odyssey by Homer. Odysseus doesn't become a hero by sailing smooth seas. He becomes one by navigating treacherous waters, facing mythical beasts and gods alike. Smooth seas never made a skilled sailor speaks not just to endurance, but to transformation. It's not just about surviving the storm, it's about becoming someone who thrives in it.
And that's the crux of advanced idiomatic understanding. It's not about using these phrases in conversation to sound clever. It's about recognizing their layers of meaning, the history, the struggle they represent. These idioms challenge us to think about how we approach difficulty in our own lives. Do we sail through, or do we allow ourselves to be shaped by the storm? Which brings us to another metaphor, one that's iconic in both literature and idiomatic language. Herman Melville's Moby Dick begins with the simple line, "Call me Ishmael." On the surface, it's just an introduction. But what does it mean to invoke that name? Ishmael is the lone survivor, the one who lives to tell the tale. So when someone refers to themselves as an Ishmael, they're aligning themselves with the outsider, the one who watches, who endures. But what price comes with that role?
The idiom "call me Ishmael" is rarely used, but when it is, it's loaded with complexity. It's about isolation, survival, but also the burden of knowledge. Ishmael witnesses the downfall of Captain Ahab, the madness of obsession. So when someone says, "Call me Ishmael," they're invoking a heavy metaphor, one that speaks to the consequences of witnessing tragedy without intervention. How often do we see this in business, in politics? How often do we stand back, watch, and survive? But at what cost?
Let's pivot to a concept that has stood the test of time. The idea that language is power. Idioms, in particular, have been wielded like weapons throughout history. Consider the phrase "kill two birds with one stone." What does this idiom reveal about our approach to efficiency, to problem solving? But more importantly, why birds? Why violence? Have we ever stopped to think about the implications of this phrase?
It's a phrase that masks brutality in the guise of cleverness. When we kill two birds with one stone, we're talking about maximizing outcomes, yes, but we're also talking about sacrifice, about collateral damage. How often do we hear this idiom in the corporate world, where efficiency sometimes comes at the expense of ethics? This is where idioms demand critical thought, not just about their meaning, but about their implications.
And this is where poetry collides with idiomatic language. Take Sylvia Plath's poem, Lady Lazarus, where she writes, "Dying is an art like everything else. I do it exceptionally well." This line forces us to reconsider the idiom rise from the ashes. On the surface, rising from the ashes is a metaphor for resilience, for rebirth. But in Plath's hands, it becomes darker. What happens when we rise only to fall again? What is the true cost of repeatedly having to rebuild?
Exactly. The idiom rise from the ashes is often romanticized, as if resilience is always beautiful. But Plath, through her poetry, reminds us that sometimes rising from the ashes is not a triumph, but a painful necessity, one that leaves scars. It's about survival, yes, but survival at what cost? This is where idioms and poetry intersect to reveal deeper truths. Truths that force us to think critically, not just about language, but about life.
Which brings us to Shakespeare, our eternal companion in the exploration of language. To be or not to be, perhaps the most famous line in the English language, isn't just a question of existence. It's about choice, about weighing the unbearable against the unknown. In idiomatic terms, we might say Hamlet is caught between a rock and a hard place. But what does that really mean?
It means Hamlet is facing an impossible decision, one where every choice leads to suffering. The idiom between a rock and a hard place captures this dilemma perfectly. It's a metaphor for those moments in life where no option seems right, and yet a decision must be made. But unlike Hamlet, who hesitates, advanced thinkers learn to navigate these moments with clarity. It's not about avoiding the hard place. It's about learning to make the best of it.
As we approach the end, let's dissect one final word: duplicity. It's a term that speaks to deception, to the art of being two-faced. But think about how this relates to the idiom speak with a forked tongue. When someone speaks with a forked tongue, they're being duplicitous, saying one thing and meaning another. It's a phrase rooted in the ancient world, in stories of snakes and betrayal. But how often do we see this today? In politics, in business, even in personal relationships.
And speaking with a forked tongue, it's not just a relic of ancient stories. It's alive and well today. In the halls of power, in the subtle art of persuasion, and even in our everyday conversations, this idiom calls out the duplicity that can shape entire narratives. But here's the challenge. Do we recognize it when we hear it? Do we understand the real implications when someone says one thing but means another?
That's the real power of language, its ability to conceal as much as it reveals. In the end, mastering idioms is not just about expanding your vocabulary. It's about sharpening your perception, about seeing through the layers of meaning that are often hidden in plain sight. Whether it's poetry, politics, or business, idioms are the keys to understanding the unspoken rules that govern our world.
So, what have we learned today? We've seen how idioms aren't just figures of speech, but powerful tools that reflect our deepest struggles, our victories, and even our betrayals. From the wisdom of the Odyssey to the complexity of Sylvia Plath's poetry, these expressions reveal the psychology behind human experience. They challenge us to think critically, to question what's truly being communicated.
And more than that, they invite us to engage with the world at a higher level. When you understand idioms, you're not just learning language, you're learning how to navigate the complexities of life itself. You're peeling back layers of culture, history, and emotion. You're becoming someone who sees beyond the surface.
The question now is, how will you use this knowledge? Will you just repeat these idioms, or will you wield them like the tools of influence they are? Will you recognize the forked tongues in your life? Will you take the road less traveled and shape your own path, understanding the real cost of doing so?
As we close, remember, language is more than words. It's power, perception, and purpose. And by mastering idiomatic language, you're not just becoming a better communicator. You're becoming a more critical thinker, a more insightful leader, and, ultimately, a more empowered individual.
Thank you for joining us in this journey through idioms, literature, and critical thought. We'll see you next time, where we continue to push the boundaries of language and thinking. But until then, don't just speak. Master the art of understanding.
Want more insights into the hidden language of influence? Subscribe and join us next time as we explore the intersections of words, power, and purpose. Remember, language isn't just about what you say, it's about what you understand.